slide them up under there, and they stay up in there for about 72 hours. That's what it takes to reach 165 degrees throughout the barrel. But both these barrels are 3 months old. So this is 3 months just at the distillery. This is after it's been to the barn for 72 hours. But you can see the difference.
Outside of the tobacco barn, you let it age longer?
Yeah, so we don't rely solely on the tobacco barn, is just one aspect of it. This particular whiskey is 2 years old.
Okay.
It's not going to drink like a 2-year-old. But there's truly nothing like a truly pot distilled, direct fired whiskey. It gets just a different profile to it.
I'm Allan Cogan. Join me as I highlight small businesses with interviews on site at distilleries, breweries, and more. My mission is to share the stories of the awesome people behind the craft. Welcome to Crafted Conversations.
Jeremy, thanks for having me back at Broadslab.
Yeah, man. Glad to have you.
Yeah, I since we last talked, I've rebranded. I've changed my name. I've invested in a bunch of fancy equipment, and things are going pretty well. And I've moved down to your neck of the woods. I'm about 45 minutes to your east. And first of all, we're here on a very cold morning. This will be released when the snow is melted, but I didn't expect to leave Wisconsin and go to North Carolina where there's ice. So how are you faring in this cold time?
It's been kind of a cold winter, unseasonably cold. We're not really used to, getting the cold. We have it, but it don't hang around but a couple of days. But it seems to be hanging around this year.
Yeah, I don't get it. The house I bought has a pool, and that's like a whole new animal of figuring out, it's got to freeze. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So tell me about Broadslab since I've been here. What's been going on with you guys? Your story's awesome. I want to talk about that too, but how have you been?
We've been good. We've been busy. We got through the farming season this year. We had a very difficult year on the ag side as far as grain production. We didn't get any rain from till, for 41 days, I think. So it was tough on the corn crop, but we had enough from the prior year to hold us over. But other than that, we've been clicking along. And like I said, we had a hot, dry summer, and now we've got a cold, looks like wet winter.
Does that bode well for the spring? Is that a good sign for?
Well, you never know. You never know what it can go. It can go either way. We'll just see what next year holds.
The one thing I love about you and your space is that you're doing everything grain to glass. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the whiskey industry of how much of this is actually agricultural. Mm-hmm. I've loved learning about how much TLC is actually needed to actually make the grain and do the thing. So tell me about that. How much do you love the farming aspect of this?
Well, the agricultural aspect of it is the reason why we're in this distillery business anyway. My grandfather, when he was coming up, that's what everybody did. They farmed and they supplemented their income by making whiskey because there's not a lot of money on the ag side. So it's nothing new. It's just different, more modern now. We're doing the same thing. We're doing it legally. And, a lot of people don't realize the fact that, beer, wine, spirits, all that's ag. All of it comes from agricultural products, and it's got to be produced first, and then, you're just adding value to the product produced on the farm. The saying is, if it wasn't for agriculture, you'd be cold, hungry, and sober.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
I mean, is the biggest work
and naked? I forgot that one. Cold, naked, hungry, and sober.
Sounds like a Saturday for me.
Yeah.
Saturday morning. No, I'm always just flabbergasted at how much work actually goes in behind the scenes. I mean, I'm sure for you, it's probably tenfold because of the farm. How much of the farm is actually what you do versus distilling? Is distilling kind of the hobby that branched out?
So we probably spend 2 to 3 days a week in the distillery.
Okay.
And the rest of the time, and it's seasonal. So sometimes we spend more time outside. And during planting season, harvest season, sometimes we actually shut down production for a couple of weeks so we can get our planting in or we can get our harvesting done. But as a general rule, we're in here 2 to 3 days a week producing, and then the rest of the time we're out doing ground maintenance and, working on the farm and that sort of thing.
And it's a family affair too, right?
Yep. So my 2 sons, they help me, and between all of us, we do it all from like I said, ground maintenance to planting, harvesting, storing, conditioning grain, milling grain, and about every 2 weeks we have to go out and we'll mill and we put in those bins out there that feed the distillery. So it just depends on the season and what needs to be done. We just chip in and get it done.
Are you using 100% of your own grain? Or
100% our own grain.
Is there ever a thought where maybe that's not sustainable? If you get too big for your britches, you might have to supplement it? Or is that something you don't want to do?
Well, all we have to do is add acres.
Okay.
And if we needed, if we had the need for the grain, then that would be a good problem to have. So we wouldn't mind adding acres. And we're set up over the years. We've tried to streamline and innovate on the ag side, and we got some pretty new tactics. We're planting with precision planters. Doing strip till, no till for cut down on erosion and keeps moisture in the soil, and it takes the need for herbicide to a certain extent away because you got all that organic matter covering the ground. So we could add acres with where we're at. We got the planting and the equipment and the harvesting capability to do that.
Do you sell your grains outside of the distilling industry? Is that a whole other side business?
Yeah. So if we have a good year, I kind of overproduce or put acres in because you don't never know what your season's going to look like.
Right.
If you have a really good season and you have great yields, then I've got excess grain that I can't use, and I'll sell it to. Last year we had a great year for corn, and we sold several tractor trailer loads of corn to Atkinson Milling. They make cornmeal and flour and stuff like that. This year was not the case. We barely made a crop, so you just never know what the season holds. And if we got the excess grain, we do sell it, and we rotate out with soybeans for crop rotation and soil health. So all of that gets sold. So we're selling something every year, on the grain market.
Sure. Are you guys growing tobacco yet?
No, we're not. We're not going.
I ask.
Yeah. So that's a whole different animal.
Yeah.
And that's gotten really modernized over the years. And what you see in tobacco production, or basically any part of agriculture now, is the ones that are left are fairly large, and it's a very competitive type business. And we're small, but the only reason we're able to be small is we do what we call value add, and we use it here in the distillery. If it was not for the distillery, I would be spinning my wheels to tend. I think we're tending around 120 acres.
Okay.
That wouldn't be feasible.
Well, I know tobacco is really harsh on the soil too.
Yeah. Which, with crop rotation, they'll do like tobacco and then soybeans one year, and then they'll go sweet potatoes, and then, it may go through 2 or 3 years before tobacco's back on it.
Right. Yeah. I didn't realize North Carolina is still the number one, I think, export in the States.
Yes.
For at least Flue.
Yes. So there's only, I think, 3 states that do flue cured tobacco, and that would be, I think, North Carolina being number 1. I believe there's some done up in the edge of Virginia.
Yep.
And South Carolina.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's what kind of caught my attention with your brand is the Flue Cured aspect. And I mean, we'll get into it, but tell us about that process. How did that come about? And I guess, what is Flue Cured? I know what it is, but.
So it was kind of an accident how I come up with the idea. But, in this neighborhood, in this area, people have always grown tobacco. And that was North Carolina's number 1 cash crop. And actually, tobacco helped build this state. I mean, it would, through universities and medical facilities, and kind of all of it was funded and shaped around. A lot of people don't know that, but shaped around tobacco.
Right.
Well, in this neighborhood, it's not uncommon to ride by in the summertime and you see plenty of tobacco fields, and you can hear the roaring of the barns curing the tobacco. You can ride by and you can smell it.
Yep.
But the process is basically when the tobacco gets ripened in the field and starts turning kind of yellow and gets to full maturity, they'll go in and they'll crop it. They'll harvest those leaves, and they contain a lot of moisture, and they're pretty much yellow. They go from green in the field, and when they start yellowing up, they'll harvest it, and it's got a lot of moisture in it, and it's they'll put it in a barn with a heat exchanger, and they'll fire up a burner, inject a lot of heat in that barn, and also air. So they've got air moving throughout that barn, and it's got a thermostat where they'll set the temperature and they'll adjust it, and they go through a curing process. And you got this process what they call yellowing, like where they'll turn it from that light yellow to that gold leaf, real dark. And then at the end of it, they got what you call leaf drying. And leaf drying's where you pretty much got the tobacco cured out and colored, and it's yellow, but you may have a little bit more moisture still contained in the stem. And you go through that drying stage where you jack the temperature up to about 165 degrees and make sure you've ridded that tobacco of all moisture. And when it comes out, it'll really be, when they get done, it'll be kind of crumbly and real so dry. And they'll actually go back and put misters and mist in and introduce some more moisture just to hold it together.
Sure.
And put some moisture in it. But how I came up with the idea, I started doing a lot of reading on maturation and whiskey and different methods, and there's a whole science behind that, on your toast levels to your char levels to your environment, your elevation, your seasons, your humidity. I mean, all that stuff comes into play, and especially the environment. These wooden barrels are like a hard sponge. They'll take on their environment. So the other aspect of that is it's all about expansion and contraction, in and out. So my thought process was, well, it'll get the presence of the tobacco. And then on the other hand, when you're heating that liquid to 165 degrees on the inside of that barrel, you're thinning the viscosity down more than it would ever normally get thinned down. Even in the top of a rick house, it wouldn't reach that kind of temperature.
Sure.
And so a thinner liquid's going to penetrate, more places, cracks, crevices. And also it expands when you heat a liquid like that. You got expansion, so it actually pushes it in under pressure. So it was an idea, and I tried it on a couple of trials and was kind of amazed at the difference and the complexity and even the visual, the color on the whiskey. So we reached out to my ag extension agent. I said, hey, I've come up with a kind of a unique, crazy idea here. What do you think? Just get his opinion on it.
Yeah.
And so he contacted NC State University, which are real big in agriculture. And so those guys came out, and we actually put probes and monitors in the barrels and hooked them up to recorders, and to kind of get some data of what's going on inside that barrel. How does the temperature move? So we did some trials with that. And probably about 3 years ago, we started on a larger scale. We usually introduce 26 barrels at one time up under that barn, and we've retrofitted the barn. Basically, we just picked it up to leave room for the barrels up underneath. And we've got a track and rail system. Basically, we transport the barrels to the barn, slide them up under there, and they stay up in there for about 72 hours. That's what it takes to reach 165 degrees throughout the barrel. Wow. And we lose, you got some downsides of that is accelerated angel share.
Yeah.
I call it accelerated angel share. If everything goes good, we'll lose about 3.5 gallons in 72 hours.
Wow.
And, and usually it's like 3% a year. So that's the industry standard, 3.5, something like that. So you have some loss, and we actually lost about 3 barrels
I remember that last time you were telling me that they popped.
Out of 150. They didn't really, you can see when we remove the barrels, they're hot. So
Yeah.
you can't hardly handle them. And it takes over a week for them to cool down once you get them back in the rick house. But you'll see the heads kind of where it's under so much intense pressure and heat. And what happens is if it finds a weak spot or something ain't just right. I think we lost 3 out of 150.
That's wild. Aside from the marketing language with tobacco and whiskey, I mean, what goes hand in hand is cigar and whiskey, right? I think it's such a unique idea, and I'm actually kind of surprised that you're the first one who made it a thing.
I was too.
You know, it kind of sounds like something that, this would have been tried back in the 20s because why not? What has been the industry response to it? Is it something that you lean on heavily? You label it Flue Cured.
Yeah. So some people, if you're from North Carolina or originally, and especially Eastern North Carolina, you know what Flue Cured is.
Right.
A lot of folks do not know what Flue Cured is. They just don't get it. So I have to explain it, or they have to read about it to figure out exactly what's the madness behind the science. But it's I think people are interested in it because it's something different, new, and unique. Which the market's full of bourbons now. Bourbons from all over the United States, and we do our rye whiskey the same way. But anytime you've got something that's a little different and new and unique, and it does. I get asked a question all the time, what do you compare it to? What's it like? I said, it's kind of by itself.
Yeah.
I don't know anything to really compare it to in a good way.
Right.
But it is truly different.
Yeah, I still have one bottle from last time I was here, but the bottle that you gifted to me, I think it was batch number 3 or something. It was a cinnamon bomb, and it is so unique.
Yeah.
And I have such a memory of that bottle because it just tasted so dang good. And so it's like as a bourbon lover, I'm always looking for new things. And of course there's cask finishes and whatever, but this is just such a unique animal by itself. So kudos to that discovery.
Yeah.
Keep doing that.
Thank you.
Have you ever thought any about because Flue tobacco is not like cigar quality tobacco.
No.
It's filler tobacco.
Yeah, basically they a lot of it's used, some of it's used here in the United States, but a lot of it overseas too, and they use it it's a flavoring tobacco basically.
Right. I'm trying to think, is there anything down the road where I'm a big cigar guy? Is there some kind of crossover that says, hey, this was a cigar aged in a Flue Cured, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
some kind of crossover.
The cigar tobacco and the Flue Cured tobacco they're different. They're similar but different, and the curing process is different. I think pretty much your cigar tobacco is more your burley tobacco, this air dried, hang it up so you don't have the intense heat.
Right.
But yeah, it's but if you ever have you ever experienced a tobacco barn? Have you ever?
No, I've never been to one.
So it's totally that smell, and when you open the doors up and you kind of the heat hits you, and then the smell, it there's no other smell like it. I mean, it's totally. You'd have to be at a barn to experience that.
Okay, I'll have to go sometime. Do you get a contact nicotine high from the aerosolized?
No, you don't. You don't. It's just it's kind of it's hard to describe the smell. It's kind of a sweet, earthy,
sure,
tobacco smell. It's a good smell.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love the smell of tobacco.
And it's when you see it, and they call it gold leaf, because it's this golden kind of amber gold looking color. It's really unique.
I love that. So I mean, I think that's one half your brand that I think is really unique. But your other brand is Broadslab, the history of this area and what North Carolina meant for whiskey production. Get into that. What's the meaning behind Broadslab, and what are we standing on right now?
So we're on a farm here, like I said, outside of Benson, in between Meta and Benson. We're considered the Meta community, and right where our farm lies at. And when you step out the back, you can see how everything kind of goes down. There's what they call a Carolina Bay, and basically it's several hundred acres of low-lying basin. And we're actually right here where we're sitting at. we're on the highest point between the Neuse and Cape Fear River.
Okay.
So we're actually on a ridge, but it's wet back here. It's really, really wet. It's unusual. And what it is that basin is formed. And if you ever look, like you can go on the internet and pull up Carolina Bays, and the whole southeast is littered with round circles. You can see them from like aerial photos. And there's different, theories of how these perfectly round craters or basins, and some of them actually created lakes, down in the southeast, and some of them didn't. Some of them created swamps and low-lying areas. But one theory was it was a meteorite shower, huge meteorites hit, because they're all in the same direction going towards the ocean, and they've done soil tests and things. Another theory was that a big meteorite hit the Great Lakes at some point. We were talking before man,
right,
and throwed ice chunks, and they created. So I don't know. I can't figure it out, but I have studied and read up on them, like what caused these things. And we happen to live right here on the edge of one, and our farm goes down into one. And so back in the 1700s, before the highways that are here now, there used to be a main road that run through this farm that ran through this Carolina Bay, which they called the Dismal, or the Indian folks would call it percussion. And they would have difficulty. The wagons would sink up in the mud during the wet season, and it would get real sticky and hard to travel through. So another big industry back in that day in this area was turpentine production. They would box out the pine trees, collect the sap, the tar, mm-hmm. and they would distill it and make tar out of turpentine. And they had there were sawmills set up everywhere. Even when I was little, you could still find the piles of sawdust and scrap from way back. Probably not the 1700s, but probably the early 20s and things like that.
Sure.
But you had this a big supply of what they call broadslabs. And when they're cutting these logs, these huge virgin pine logs, are what you call heart pine. So they got a lot of that turpentine sap in them. They're really resilient to rot, and they hold up well. It's got heart pine. But when they would saw these things, they box them out, and you make a square cant so you can get down and start cutting boards. Mm-hmm. Well, this outer slab would be flat on one side and rounded on the outside. It's not a lot of value there, because they're trying to just slab that thing out to get where they can cut boards. So it's kind of scrap. And they took those broad slabs and laid down throughout that road bed through this Dismal to ride down a broad slab board road, basically. And they nicknamed this community Broadslab because of that road. And then years later, it got associated with bootlegging, because everybody in Broadslab, everybody had a farm, some hogs on the ground, and a still, pretty much. And a lot of people that kind of went hand in hand to supplement your income was farm and make whiskey. So that's where we got our name from, and that's kind of how I grew up. And a lot of those people now are gone, but I remember them growing up. I mean, it was just a common thing. Everybody around Christmas time had their own brandy or whiskey that they made.
Oh, sure. Did you have some distillation history in your family?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's my grandfather and all his uncles and his brother, and it was just a common thing. Pretty much everybody. I ain't gonna say everybody. There was a few that didn't, but there were very few.
Well, I love that continuation of history, not just in your family, but the area. Such a unique thing that I don't think people even think about, as far as like where turpentine comes from, the history of that. And I love that you embrace local history, especially with your name.
Yeah, and actually on the farm up here at the road, kind of in between my shop and the retail area, I hadn't seen them, but I grew up produce farming here. So
okay.
we got out and did a lot of handwork in the field, chopping and harvesting and plowing. And so we spent a lot of time in the field. And two things that I remember is you could, in one area, you get these black chunks of like tar substance. And my granddaddy told me that there was a turpentine distillery set up right there, and that's how it got scattered. And it's still, some of it's still there. And used to find some arrowheads too. That was pretty unique.
That is cool. How long have you guys been on this farm, the family?
So I want to say it got purchased in the 1840s.
Okay. Wow. A lot of history.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Has there been any discussion of old family recipes from moonshine or a thing that was made here that you want to honor someday with a specific product? Or
we already have.
Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure.
And so we, the thing is we make bourbon and rye whiskey, and we're doing barrel age and maturation. Our history did not come from that. I mean, everything was clear.
Yep.
It was white, and no matter what it was, if it was brandy, fruit brandy, or grain whiskey, it was all clear whiskey. And so we make a shine that's really just a clear 100 proof corn whiskey that's really, really smooth. It's kind of on the sweet side. And it's based off of my granddaddy's one of it. And it was funny because when he gave me the recipe, he didn't write it down. He told it to me. And it was in, because they would do a barrel or two at a time. And it was like in quarts and pecks and,
right.
Gallons. So many gallons of this, so many pecks of that. But I had to convert that into pounds because, obviously we're doing more than a few barrels.
Right. Was that what got you into distilling? Was your grandfather? Did he teach you, or did you come to it afterwards?
He kind of unknowingly. So he had older brother, that lived across the road, and he helped us on the farm. So I spent a lot of time with my granddaddy and my great uncle, and we'd be in the field and just passing time and working. And I'd hear them talk, and they were, they'd tell about, old bootlegging stories and stuff that happened. And my grandfather's brother, he actually pulled federal time for making whiskey and got put on the chain gang.
Oh, wow.
And they actually came down 50 highway, used to be dirt back then. And I heard the story about he was on the chain gang cleaning out the ditches coming down and for pulling time for making whiskey. And my grandmother actually made the guards and the chain gang. She knew they were down the road and they were coming. It'd be hours. Anyway, she baked a chocolate cake for them. And they actually sit up under that same oak tree and eat chocolate cake.
Oh, man.
The guards and the chain gang. But so just growing up hearing all the stories and the history, I kind of got intrigued and interested. Started making wine. Like he didn't know what I was doing, but me and the boys here in the neighborhood, we'd pick these wild scuppernongs and we'd I call them mash them in, and we'd bust them up and mash them in and add some sugar and ferment them, and then we'd strain the hulls and everything out in a pillowcase with a tobacco stick and twist it tight, and that's how we strained it. And then we'd jug it up. And we thought we were doing something, but that's where I got the basic fundamentals of fermentation.
Sure.
Growing up and basically playing and doing that, and then started dabbling in distillation, probably in high school, something like that. So
okay.
I didn't ever think I'd make a career out of it. I didn't say, well, I want to be a distiller. It didn't work like that. It was just something I did. And then when I got older, I was like, you can't farm small anymore. So it's like, how do we utilize this farm, make it sustainable, honor the history, and keep things going? And there was really not even any craft distilleries going on then. There was a few outside the state.
Right.
And so I kind of started exploring and looking at it, and we started working that way. And I think we started in 07, 08 working toward it, and finally got opened up in 2012.
Yeah. And it's been history since.
And it's been ongoing. It has not stopped. It's been an ongoing building process since.
Oh, I bet.
So, it all didn't happen overnight. We just had a little piece at the time as we could.
Hey, y'all. Allan Cogan here with Crafted Conversations. If you want to support the show and the mission of sharing the stories of craft, head over to buymeacoffee.com/craftedcombos. I'd really appreciate throwing a couple bucks my way to help me pay for travel, the equipment that I use, the time that I spend editing, all the software that I use. I really appreciate any support you can give me. And if you can't afford a couple bucks, at least give me some feedback or go over to your YouTube and subscribe or follow us on Spotify. Anything helps. to make sure that we share the story of craft and give these small business owners a little limelight and get them out on a platform that really showcases what they're doing. I can't do this without you guys or your support, so I would really appreciate you pitching in and helping out. So I'll see you out there, and I really appreciate it. Cheers.
Since moving down here, the house I bought has a well, and it's not hooked up to the house anymore. We have public water, but I have to replace the pump and all those things, but I can use it for my chickens and for gardening, whenever. And I'm praying one day that we can get some home distillation laws changed, because that'd be perfect to just play around with.
Mm-hmm.
I can home brew, but it's not as fun. I'm not a beer guy.
Well, that's the main ingredient is that water, because, municipality water will not work for distillation.
Exactly
or
right.
fermentation.
Yep.
The yeast will not thrive. So.
Right. Have you played around with the yeast stuff? Because I know that's a whole nother animal of the science and chemistry. Have you found just one that works for you, or have you play around?
Yeah. So I over the years I've experimented with all kinds of yeast: beer yeast, wine yeast, brandy yeast, liquid yeast, cultured yeast. I mean, I've ordered and tried a lot of different things. And what's really funny is I'm back to just and I know the strand it is, but it's basically a baker's yeast that I use.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and it actually works really good for us. It's predictable, it's consistent, and there's nothing fancy about it. Just to be honest with you. So we pitch a fresh batch of yeast every time.
Yeah, it works. I talked to a distiller, a really, really small micro distiller up in northern Pennsylvania, and he's using a bread yeast from Aldi. He goes to Aldi and just those tear open, pours it in. It works.
We buy it by the case, and it comes in 1 pound bricks, basically.
Yeah. But I kind of laugh when I heard that from him. I'm like, I guess it's yeast. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
And look, I've tried all these real expensive culture.
Sure.
And I've run the batches and tried, as far as performance, overall flavor, and side-by-side comparisons. And I'm right back to where I started at.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
That's right. Well, I think we should cheers to some of your hard work.
Yeah.
Since I've been here, you've made a rye, and I haven't had that yet. So tell me about what we got here.
So we actually make a single barrel version of both of these, but this one is our, I call it my blended bourbon. Basically, we'll take 2 or 3 barrels and we'll pick them, we'll blend them together, and we proof it down consistently to 93 proof, and that's what we bottle it at. Now, the single barrels, they're going to be just what it sounds like. They're going to be a single barrel, no proofing, whatever they come, and they'll usually range from 114 to 116 in that range as far as proof. But we've got the 93 blended here. We've got the blended rye that it's actually proofed at 96 proof. And we've got a single barrel version of this too. That's usually around 115. This is actually what we won the Chef Showdown Distillery of the Year.
Oh, yeah.
And at Revival, they did the mocktail and the cocktail using this blended rye. It's actually, the rye is, the variety is Bruisey rye.
Okay.
And it's been around this area forever. And usually people would just grow it for a cover crop.
Right.
For cows to graze on. And if they harvested it, it was just so they would have more cover crop or more grazing to plant back. So I knew it performed well in this area. It's kind of ready, available. So we planted Bruisey, a Bruisey rye. And it's great. It's great. But it's 70% rye, 25% corn, and 5% malt. All these grains are non-GMO.
Sure.
The corn's actually a white, like a white dent corn, which you would make cornmeal or flour out of. But you want to try something?
Yeah, please. I'll drink whiskey. Twist my arm. It's probably good that you're using the dent corn too, because that lets the rye flavors show more. If you use the more,
and the corn gives you the sweetness and
right,
and a little bit, but
beautiful. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
And see, so how old is this I know outside of the tobacco barn, does you let it age longer?
Yeah, so we don't rely solely on the tobacco barn is just one aspect of it. This particular whiskey is 2 years old.
Okay.
It's not going to drink like a 2-year-old. It's going to be a lot more mature than that.
It doesn't look like a 2-year-old.
But you will never get another 2-year-old whiskey from Broadslab Distillery. This is it. And we waited around until I thought we had some that was worthy of going to market. And but the next time we bottle, we've got 3-year-old whiskey. So the next that comes out, it's going to be 3 years old. And in a year from now, it'll be 4 years old, that sort of thing. So probably never get any more 2-year-old whiskey. But it does not drink like a 2-year-old whiskey.
Well, cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Thanks for having me. Man,
Pretty
that's
good.
just so different.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I'd love to do a bunch of side-by-sides of like the same mash bill and the same aging and then versus a Flue Cured bourbon that you have, because it's just such an odd process to me that it works, obviously, you know. Have you tried just putting it in there for 72 hours and then just having that as a product? Does it do enough? Or
early on, no. It's there's no substitute for time.
Right.
So it's doable. It makes it a little bit better, but that's rushing things.
Yeah.
It's not ready. And I'll be honest with you, we stuck to the traditional racks in the rick house where we've got the barrel laying down, the bung in the side. We getting both head contact, and we let the rick house kind of open so we can get the air movement. All those things come into play. You know, they still go through the seasons here of the summer, expansion, contraction, winter. It needs it. You know, that is not drink. Would you agree that is not drink like a 2-year-old whiskey?
It drinks like a 6-year-old whiskey. Yeah,
exactly.
It's kind of breaking my brain that this is 2 years old.
Yep. So you can imagine what's it going to be in 2 more years.
Yeah, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
What's the oldest barrel you have in the rick house?
About 3 years.
About 3 years. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you have thought about, like you find a barrel that just tastes good, that we're not going to touch that until it's 6 years old? Or do you have a barrel that you've said, like, this is when we opened, or you know what I mean?
Not yet. We'll go through there, and I'll be honest with you, just because we don't want to hold it back. When we go in and we start tapping barrels and pulling samples, we're looking for the best of the best in there at the time, and that's what we pull and bottle. Now when we get further into it, and we've got more to choose from, far as we've got some more mature whiskey and a lot of it, then we may select one and stick it back. But right now, we find the best and put it in the bottle.
I've always loved the stories I come across of distilleries that really don't have the resources to do it, but they accidentally lose a barrel, and then 8 years pass and they find it, and it's like, oh, where'd that go?
Yeah.
That's usually someone who doesn't have a manifest or organized.
Yeah.
But I'm curious too, with all the different things coming. I mean, we have bourbon and rye. Bourbon's king. Rye's still coming up again. But now American single malt's on the horizon. They just passed a new law that says you can have American single malt, 100% barley. And then American agave spirit apparently is making a big come up. I've talked to a couple of distilleries that have an agave spirit that's like a reposado that's been aging in a barrel for 4 or 5 years, just kind of playing the game like, hey, maybe when it becomes a thing in 3-4 years, we can release it and make money on it. Have you thought anything about going out and doing the wazoo wild things like single malt or?
Nothing's off the table. Right now, we're just trying to get this whole bourbon and rye thing kind of kicked off. And the agave thing, I've thought about that because, do you realize that agave will grow like in the coastal regions here in the United States?
Yep. So
I thought it'd be really interesting. I probably would. If somebody, it would be fun to do, but there's only so much time in a day and so many resources.
Right.
But it would be really cool if somebody would grow some agave, harvest it, and have an American agave spirit. They couldn't call it tequila, obviously. But,
right.
But that'd be cool.
How much of a calculus is it for like experimentation? Have you been able to set aside some time for playing with things, or are you in a tempo now where it's like, no, we got to make what we make, And at some point in the future, you want to schedule some time to say, all right, I have enough on the shelf. I want to play with this next batch.
Yeah, we're in that. Just pretty much we're sticking with what we got right now. We got 3 main mash bills we run. Not to say that we don't need to change that up at some time, and we will.
Sure.
We don't have a wheated bourbon at the current time. That's something that I tend to like rye bourbons.
Yeah.
But I know that it's not all for me, so we will make a wheated bourbon at some point.
I'm the same way. I like a high rye bourbon, but I also love a higher, like a malted barley bourbon. I've had a couple of great bourbons that have about 15% malted rye or malted barley because that chocolatey flavor comes through the sweetness of the bourbon. Have you flavored barley much?
We only got 5% in our mash bills,
right?
So that's something in the future we want to mess with different varieties and kind of see. But I hadn't done a lot of experimentation. Basically, I had that 5% just to get some natural enzyme out of it. Maybe there's a little flavor to it, but we probably could improve on experimenting with the barley.
I think you've set yourself up pretty well with the Flue Cured being the most unique thing about you, because if you just had another bourbon down the street, right, it would probably encourage you to do more experimentation.
Yeah.
Have you thought about cask finishing at all? Like taking a Flue Cured bourbon, put it in a wine cask, and see what that does?
Yeah, we have, and just hadn't got around to doing that yet. But
it's all time and resource. Yeah. I get it, but I'm always curious because you are allowed to do that. You are the operator, owner, et cetera. You can make the decisions.
Yeah, and so we can. We're looking forward to. I don't know what it'll be. Another year from now, we should be able to release some bottled in bond.
Oh, there you go. Yes,
because it's made here.
It's a 4-year rate.
It's aged here, so we should have some bottled in bond in about a year.
Yeah, there you go. Hit all the marketing things you can do.
Yeah.
Since you've started, what has been the biggest headache for you?
Marketing, distribution.
I believe that.
Just that's honestly the equipment, making the whiskey and putting it back. That's the easy part. Even running the business, agritourism, that's easy. That's enjoyable. What's really frustrating for us is people get excited about what we're doing. They believe in what we're doing, but then when they get away from here, it's very hard to obtain.
Yeah.
As far as getting shelf space or even get on a shelf, or even get the ABC warehouse to house it and distribute it. We do have online sales now, but that's kind of expensive with the shipping and everything.
Right. And you can't ship to every state, only select.
There's 35 select states that they ship to, but the company we work with, they're based out of D.C. So
yeah, it's Big Thirst, right?
Yep.
I know them. They're good people.
Yeah.
I am concerned and frustrated with how the industry has gone, especially as the economy's kind of done a roller coaster. Small businesses, craft distilleries, breweries, wineries, or otherwise have kind of struggled, especially after COVID. It's such a weird time that we're in right now. And it makes me concerned that a lot of the local and state and federal laws are still set in the 1890s, and they haven't changed. The ABC law is an example, right? I'm from Wisconsin. I could buy Everclear at a Walmart.
Yeah.
I moved to Virginia and then North Carolina, and both are ABC controlled state. And it's like, I don't understand this. I do to a point, right? There's a reason back in the day, the whole concern about alcohol, but also we're past that. And if you want a small business to flourish in your community, I mean, you have more than just a distillery here. You have a tasting room, you have an agritourism, you have a farm, you have all these things that the community probably enjoys to have a part of. Why can't you sell your stuff in other states? And it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I can sell in other states.
Well, you don't need.
Yeah. So, but there's a whole process, and being a small company, I have learned that if you don't have support in that state, like somebody marketing and supporting the brand, then it won't work. But what's really frustrating here in North Carolina, you go in an ABC store and you see stacks of Jack Daniels, stacks of Weller, and then everybody's standing in line in the cold and in the heat, waiting in line to get a few bottles of allocated bourbon. And what's really frustrating to me, knowing what I know, is, and they're good products, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of a buzz. And But most of these brands that people are waiting in line for, or that you see stacks of in the store, are owned by a company that's got a portfolio with 1,500 different companies in it that are all over the world, and they're publicly traded, a lot of them.
Yep.
And it's not what it seems to be. You know, they're sourcing from here, putting under this label, and moving it around. And they do well at marketing. They've created this buzz, and people are standing in line for it. But in North Carolina, when they pick up that product, that money is leaving this state and it's never coming back.
Right.
Whereas some of these small producers that are making craft products in the state, every bit of those dollars are going to stay in the state and help better our economy. And that's where I think the ABC is kind of falling short, is maybe they should start putting stacks of localized stuff and pushing it a little bit more, and creating awareness around that, because it's a win-win for everybody.
Right.
It's frustrating when I go in an ABC store and I see stacks of everything, pallets, cases, and I may have 3 bottles of one product over there somewhere. You know, you have to look for it real hard to find it. You know, this and that could be our fault because we don't have somebody in there, you know, marketing or you know, trying to get us up on the shelf or something. But I think to a certain extent, the ABC system should take pride into building North Carolina and keeping those dollars in the local economy.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't really think that's thought about a lot.
No, and I always thought that the perception of the market was changing to appreciate more local stuff. Like when I go to a store, if I see North Carolina made or Wisconsin made or something, you know, whatever, even if it's an out-of-state product, but it's a local made small mom and pop shop, I'm going to like that better. And I don't know if it's just like the new generation coming up who's interested in bourbon and rye, and they hear about it on social media and they say, "Ooh, Buffalo Trace," as I wear a Blanton's hat. I just like the hat. But it's like, it's not a bad product.
Yeah.
But the secondary market's selling it for $65+ and it's not worth that.
Right.
I don't know what it is. It's weird. And it might be a marketing game.
It is. It's a marketing game. And it's like, you know, they promote it, push it, and they've created a buzz. And if you really think about it, what is all the buzz about? You
right.
know, really, I mean, it's whiskey, and there's good whiskeys and there's bad whiskeys and there's better whiskeys and there's more better whiskey, you know. But there's a lot of good stuff out there that's locally made. There's some stuff out there that's not so good.
Yep.
And I tell folks all the time, do I say we make the best whiskey in the world? No, I'm not that bold. I think we make a good one.
Sure.
And, you know, I think it's pretty much brand awareness that these big corporations are so good at pushing it and creating this buzz that people kind of overlook these smaller guys in these craft products. And I don't know. I'd like to see that change somehow, some way.
Yeah, it's tough. I have a theory. And I've told this a couple times to different people. I don't know if you're aware of Joe Rogan and his whole, I mean, 10 years ago, he got a sponsorship with Buffalo Trace. And on his show, he talks about Buffalo Trace, and he talks about it on ad rolls, and he drinks it on the channel with different people. And I'm convinced that because of his following and how big he is with the younger generation who are interested in bourbon, that Buffalo Trace skyrocketed because they're the oldest distillery, and because Blanton's is that secret, how do I get that bottle? Because it's allocated. You can never find it. And I think there's a correlation between when Joe Rogan got sponsored by Buffalo Trace to when the younger crowd started buying bourbon. I don't know. It's that's my theory.
Could be. And you know, and look, I'm glad, because if they got turned on to bourbon and otherwise they wouldn't have, that's a good thing. That's a positive thing.
Yeah.
I just, like I said, I would like to see the ABC system here in the state embrace not just me, but other, you know, worthy products and brands, because it's all about the dollar.
Yeah.
What moves fast, nobody's thinking about that it comes in and the money goes out.
Right.
You know, it's not, they're not really investing a lot. It's almost like they're taking money out of the state when, we could leave it in the state.
Yeah.
I don't, that would be, and the whole, it would, so many aspects, it would, on the agriculture side, they need more agricultural products. Just, it just goes a long way as far as the local economies. And it's not the answer to everything, but it sure would help.
Yeah. And I do. I mean, it's a whole different topic of conversation for, whether or not ABC is the right model to even sell craft product. Because, I mean, if you can get a bottle of Jack Daniels and you're going to use that for your mixer for your Christmas party, I understand that. It's a $20 bottle. I wouldn't buy a bottle of Broadslab and use that as a mixer. I'm going to use that to showcase the flavor of your product. And I wonder if that market is different than, because when you go to ABC store, you have, your 1800 tequila, you have your Jack Daniels, your Jim Beam, and that's what I go there for, to get that. I could go to a specialty liquor store or something that's different, that is meant to be for stuff like this. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Laws across the states to me are confusing.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what you go through as a distiller.
It's not a very good climate for small craft distilleries. It's hard.
Yeah.
And, here's the thing, like Kentucky, for example, they're more established as far as distilleries, and they're known as the bourbon state. I mean, nobody's going to disagree with that. But look at the tourism and what it does for the local economy.
Yeah.
Just the people that go to Kentucky. And we're not going to be, North Carolina, we can't get that title, but we can create our own, and there's a lot of dollars around if everybody would get on board to promote the local tourism and get people to come in the state, stay a night, spend some money.
Right.
Eat at the local restaurant. This thing just goes so big.
Yep.
And it's, to me, it's disheartening to see how difficult it is to navigate the ABC system when a few little tweaks and changes could open it up, and it's going to mean so much to so many. And to me, it's a no-brainer. But
yeah, I agree. Well, I think you're on the right path because you're local. You care about the state. You care about, the history here, which is what I love about this is the Flue Cured part and the Broadslab part is like North Carolina. To its roots.
And I'm a North Carolina boy. I mean, I've been here my whole life and been right here on this farm. And there's some days go by I don't even hit asphalt. I stay right here on the farm. But yeah, and another thing is like, where do you go to come? I live here.
Right.
I work here. You see the shop, the shed with all the equipment up under it. We got a nice bar at the front, retail area. You come to one of our tours, drink some whiskey with us, buy a bottle. I mean, you're going to get to meet the distiller, the family. We don't have a lot of that, and I'd like to see us succeed, not just on mine, but I just think that North Carolina needs more of that, not just us, but all across North Carolina.
I agree. I think, local across the states, I think is just, there's, and it's especially farm to or grain to glass. I think that's unique in itself. There's more of them out there, but I think it's such a cool thing to have. Like I grow it here, or at least you purchase it, not you, but people purchase it from local farms in their area rather than some big corporation. I think there needs to be more of that, and I think that needs to be showcased.
Yeah, I think across the board, people need to eat local, go to the mom and pop restaurants, buy their meats local from local producers, go to the local farmers market. If we could get more of that, and honestly, they'd be surprised at the quality and the value that's out there.
Yep.
And there again, that money, it's not a product from overseas. Did you realize, I want to say somebody told me it's way up over 50% of our produce and we're getting off it comes up from overseas.
Yep.
So how's that not a good thing to keep all those dollars here and your producer? If you got a problem, you can go to that producer.
Yeah, right.
I think there's value all across the board in that.
I couldn't agree more. And I will say, just to cap this, I do have a small root in North Carolina. I don't think I told you last time. My father was actually born on Camp Lejeune.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
His dad was a Marine.
Okay.
And he was born. He was here until he was a year old, and then they moved to San Diego, where he grew up, and then he eventually moved to Milwaukee and had me. So now I've come full circle, and the father has become the son, and the son becomes the father. I'm here in North Carolina.
Well, how's North Carolina treating you?
I love it.
You love
I love it.
Yeah.
I bought I'm National Guard, so I'm actually trying to transfer down to Fort Bragg and Fort Liberty.
Fort Bragg.
Thank you. Fort
Bragg.
I had to get canceled. No, I'm transferring down to Fort Bragg to do different stuff, but I bought a house from a buddy who was retired military, and he actually moved back to Wisconsin. That's where he's originally from too, to be with his daughters and do his thing. But the house he has is we walked into a setup. We had our son, and then literally the next day after leaving the hospital, moved to our house from Virginia. So my wife's a trooper, but we have 4 acres and a chicken farm, and I love it. I'm enough outside of Sanford where I'm in the rural area, but I'm close enough to go to a Walmart.
Well, and so my wife, she has chickens, and I thought that was just going to be a fad, but she's had them for years.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it is about women and chickens, but some of these women like chickens. She likes the fresh eggs.
Yep.
But and I tell you, that area that you're in, if you're in between here and Sanford, it is blowing up fast. So there's so much going on in the state, and even here in my community, we're still rural.
Yeah.
But it's changing so fast. It's not the same place it was.
No. Yeah, and we when we moved in, we had a couple signs that said the new highway coming through or whatever. We went to some kind of festival. I forget what it was. I think it was downtown Sanford's Summerfest or whatever. And one of the city planners was there, and they had a whole presentation of what was going on. I asked him, we live here. What does that mean for us? And he sent me a handwritten letter and said, hey, go to this website. This is what I thought about you, whatever. This is what we're doing. I said, well, that's really thoughtful. And it made me feel better. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to have a truck going through my front yard.
Yeah. It's changing fast. That area is really growing.
I really appreciate this area. It's not the South, but it's South compared to where I've been. And I moved to the DC area, which is not the South. Northern Virginia is a different part of Virginia. It's basically DC. But the hustle and bustle of metropolitan DC is I hate it. There's too many people, too much traffic. And I grew up visiting Mississippi. I have a bunch of family in Mississippi, going turkey hunting every spring and having a good time. And you go down south, time slows down. And I appreciate that. There's less people, there's less craziness. People are more hospitable. They wave to you on the side of the road. I love that aspect.
Yes.
So I'm happy.
And it's still that way here to a certain extent, but it's changing.
It is.
We've got so much growth. We're the bedroom to Wake County. Honestly, I would have never thought I saw this early in my life because it's progressing and changing so fast. We're on 125 acres here on the farm. And I can tell when I get on the road with a piece of equipment, we tend some farms down the road. I can tell the traffic's picked up.
Yeah.
I can tell, the mood's just different. And another thing is the values of everything's going, and the property taxes get. So honestly, I'm sitting here thinking we've got to be really innovative, and we got to do well just to stay here. You know,
right.
Because it's really changing fast. And in one aspect you could say that's a good thing, but in another aspect, I don't think it's such a good thing.
Yeah, it's I don't know. There are days I watch my son right now is 7 months old, and I watch him, and growing up, I'm like, man, I miss not having responsibilities. I got to pay taxes.
Yeah.
I'm a homeowner now. My HVAC went out right before Christmas. And it's like, what am I doing?
Yeah, it looks like the older you get, it should get easier. Once you get past it, don't.
No,
it don't. It gets more complicated.
I'm just going to start a distillery on my property. And
do that.
Drink my sorrows away.
You will really, really complicate things.
For the ATF, I'm joking. Well, hey, Jeremy, thank you so much for having me here.
Man.
It's good to catch up with you. I'll be back.
Yeah.
So
glad
cheers.
to have you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
All right. Good deal.
If you enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate a follow and share on social media, subscribe to our YouTube, and be sure to give us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Everything you see and hear is out of pocket for us, including travel. If you support our mission of showcasing the amazing stories behind these small businesses, do me a favor and head over to buymeacoffee.com/craftedconvos. Buy Me a Coffee is an awesome way to help creators like me with simple one-time donations or a monthly contribution. Every dime goes into giving these breweries, distilleries, and more some much-deserved limelight. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out. Cheers!